Have you ever wondered why a woman, whose eyes betray a silent plea for liberation, remains tethered to a relationship that slowly suffocates her spirit? It's a question whispered in hushed tones, a paradox that confounds those who stand outside the gilded cage. We see the vibrant spark dim, the laughter grow faint, and yet, she stays. This isn't a simple choice. It's a complex interplay of invisible forces, psychological currents that hold her captive long after her heart has yearned to fly. Today, we peel back the layers of this profound enigma, delving into the very foundations of emotional behavior to understand the unseen chains that bind. Her name was Elara, a woman whose artistic soul once painted canvases with bold strokes of joy and vibrant hues of passion. She met Liam, a man who, at first glance, seemed to embody stability and strength. He was a rock, she thought, a steady anchor in a world of flux. Their early days were a symphony of shared dreams and whispered promises. He admired her art, encouraging her to paint more, to explore new dimensions of her creativity. She felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. This initial enchantment, however, was a masterfully woven illusion, a gilded trap laid with subtle precision. As the months unfurled, a creeping shift began. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a shadow lengthening with the setting sun. Liam's admiration for her art morphed into a quiet critique, then into a thinly veiled dismissal. "Perhaps you should focus on something more practical, my love," he'd suggest, his voice soft, almost caring, as he gestured towards her half-finished landscapes. "Art is a lovely hobby, but it doesn't pay the bills." The words, though seemingly innocuous, were tiny hammers chipping away at her self-worth. Elara, whose lifeblood was her creative expression, found herself painting less, her vibrant palette gathering dust. Her studio, once a sanctuary, became a room she avoided. She attributed it to stress, to the demands of their shared life, anything but the gnawing realization that Liam's influence was subtly, systematically, dismantling her identity. One evening, she had spent hours meticulously working on a portrait for a client, a piece that felt like a return to her true self. She presented it to Liam with a tremor of anticipation. He barely glanced at it. "It's fine," he mumbled, eyes glued to his phone. "But you know, that client probably just wants something to fill an empty wall. No one truly appreciates art these days." A cold dread settled in Elara's stomach. It wasn't the words themselves, but the complete lack of engagement, the casual dismissal of her very essence. It was as if her inner light was being siphoned away, slowly, methodically, by someone who claimed to love her. This wasn't overt abuse. There were no shouted words, no physical blows. It was far more insidious, a psychological erosion that targeted her core belief in herself, her value as a creative being. She began to question everything. Was her art truly pointless? Was she indeed impractical? Frivolous? The seeds of doubt, once sown, blossomed into a thicket of insecurity. This is where the wisdom of Carl Jung resonates deeply. Jung posited the concept of the shadow, the repressed aspects of our personality that we deny or project onto others. Liam, perhaps unconsciously, was projecting his own unfulfilled creative desires or insecurities onto Elara, effectively stifling her light to make his own perceived inadequacy less glaring. He couldn't tolerate her brilliance because it mirrored a void within himself. This projection became a cage for Elara, as she internalized his criticisms, making them her own inner voice. She started to believe that her artistic pursuits were selfish, a drain on their resources, a foolish indulgence. The vibrant woman who once painted freely was replaced by a muted version, a chameleon adapting to the emotional climate Liam dictated. The insidious nature of this control extended beyond her art. Her friendships, once a vibrant tapestry of shared experiences, began to fray. Liam would find subtle ways to discourage her from seeing her friends. "Are you sure you want to go out tonight? You seem tired, and I was really looking forward to a quiet evening, just us." Or, "Your friend Sarah is so negative. She always brings you down, doesn't she?" These seemingly innocuous comments, delivered with a veneer of concern, slowly isolated Elara. She found herself making excuses to her friends, canceling plans until eventually, the invitations stopped coming. Her social circle, a vital source of external validation and perspective, dwindled to nothing, leaving her with only Liam and his carefully constructed reality. This isolation was a crucial step in tightening the invisible chains, stripping her of external support systems and reinforcing her dependence on him. She began to walk on eggshells, meticulously curating her words and actions to avoid Liam's subtle disapproval. His moods became the weather of their home. A slight frown, a prolonged silence, a dismissive wave of the hand. These nonverbal cues became powerful instruments of control. She learned to anticipate them, to preempt them, sacrificing her own desires and opinions in a desperate bid to maintain a fragile peace. This is where operant conditioning, as explored by B.F. Skinner, casts a long shadow. Liam, perhaps without conscious intent, was reinforcing behaviors he desired, her quiet compliance, her focus on practical matters, and extinguishing those he disliked, her artistic expression, her independent social life, through a system of subtle rewards and punishments. A pleasant evening was the reward for conformity. A cold silence or a critical remark was the punishment for venturing outside his prescribed boundaries. Elara, desperate for connection and positive reinforcement, unknowingly became a participant in her own subjugation. The pain, though not physical, was profound. It was the ache of a soul slowly shrinking, a vibrant spirit being diminished. She would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, a profound loneliness washing over her. She knew, deep down, that something was terribly wrong. The woman she saw in the mirror was a stranger, a pale imitation of the joyful artist she once was. Yet, the thought of leaving felt like tearing off a limb. The fear was a tangible presence. Fear of being alone, fear of financial instability, fear of the unknown, and most powerfully, the fear of validating Liam's unspoken accusations that she was indeed weak, impractical, and unable to fend for herself. This internal conflict, this agonizing dance between the soul's longing for freedom and the ego's grip of fear, became Elara's constant companion. The path to her own individuation, her journey to becoming a whole, integrated self, was blocked by the powerful forces of conditioning and the deeply ingrained fear of confronting the shadow she had unknowingly absorbed from Liam. Elara's journey mirrors the archetype of the lost self, a woman whose vibrant individuality has been slowly eroded by an insidious form of relational control. She is the embodiment of a spirit caged not by bars, but by the subtle manipulations of another's ego. Her experience is a profound reminder that true freedom isn't just about breaking physical chains. It's about reclaiming your psychological autonomy, your inherent worth, and the authentic expression of your being. You, too, may recognize echoes of Elara's struggle in your own life or in the lives of women you know. Perhaps you've felt that nagging sense of unease, that subtle pressure to conform, to shrink yourself to fit someone else's narrow definition of you. It is crucial to recognize these insidious patterns. Pay attention to the quiet erosion of your passions, the subtle dismissal of your dreams, the gentle steering away from your support systems. Your inner voice, that gut feeling, is your compass. Listen to it. It whispers truths that the ego, tangled in fear and conditioned responses, often tries to silence. Reclaim your inner artist, your independent spirit, your unique voice. Begin by acknowledging the invisible threads that bind you, for only then can you begin to unravel them one by one. The very fabric of our being is woven from countless threads of experience, memory, and the unspoken narratives we inherit. Yet, what happens when the narrative we live is not our own, but one imposed upon us, so subtly that we mistake it for truth? This insidious process, often termed gaslighting, is the second unseen chain, a psychological manipulation that twists reality until a woman questions her own sanity, her perceptions, and ultimately, her intrinsic worth. It is a profound, disorienting fog, making the path to freedom feel not just distant, but non-existent. Consider the words of Carl Rogers, a pioneer in humanistic psychology, who emphasized the importance of unconditional positive regard and the individual's actualizing tendency, the inherent drive to fulfill one's potential. What happens when, instead of positive regard, there is consistent, subtle negation of one's reality? Rogers believed that a nurturing environment allows one to flourish, to trust their internal compass. Conversely, an environment that consistently denies or distorts a person's reality can lead to profound self-doubt and a fracturing of the self-concept. When a partner systematically undermines a woman's perception, memories, and feelings, they are, in essence, dismantling her internal compass, leaving her adrift in a sea of manufactured uncertainty. This is the very essence of gaslighting, a tactic that turns a woman's own mind into her most formidable prison. Elara's journey into this fog of distorted reality was gradual, like the slow creep of a morning mist across a still lake. It began with minor disagreements. She would recall a conversation, a promise made, only for Liam to deny it vehemently. "I never said that, Elara. You must be misremembering." Or, "That's not how it happened at all. You always exaggerate." At first, she dismissed it as a simple misunderstanding, a lapse in memory on her part. She was, after all, human, prone to error. But these instances became more frequent, more pronounced. She would recount a shared experience, a public event, only for Liam to scoff. "That's not what you saw, darling. You're imagining things." His tone would be calm, almost pitying, which only served to further disarm her. The weight of his unwavering certainty began to press down on her. Her confidence in her own recollections wavered. She started to second-guess herself constantly. Did I really say that? Did that truly happen? The vividness of her own memories started to fade, replaced by a creeping doubt that felt like a virus infecting her mind. This constant questioning, this internal battle over her own reality, was exhausting. It sapped her energy, leaving her feeling perpetually confused and inadequate. The world, once a clear and distinct landscape, became a blurry, unreliable canvas. Liam's tactics escalated from denying memories to invalidating her emotions. When Elara expressed frustration or sadness about their deteriorating relationship, he would retort, "Why are you so emotional? It's really not that big of a deal." Or, with a dismissive sigh, "You're always so sensitive. You need to toughen up." Her legitimate feelings were reframed as flaws, as evidence of her irrationality. This profound invalidation was perhaps the most damaging aspect. Our emotions are our internal signals, guiding us, informing us about our experiences. When those signals are consistently dismissed as invalid or exaggerated, we begin to distrust our own inner world. Elara learned to suppress her feelings, to mask her pain, believing that her emotional responses were inherently wrong. She became adept at feigning cheerfulness, at pretending everything was fine, even as her soul screamed in silent agony. This relentless erosion of her self-trust was compounded by Liam's subtle manipulation of her environment. He would sometimes misplace her keys or move her belongings, only to find them later in an obvious spot, making her feel forgetful or disorganized. "See, Elara? You just weren't looking properly. You're always so scatterbrained." These small, seemingly insignificant acts chipped away at her sense of competence and control over her own life. It was a meticulously orchestrated campaign to sow confusion and dependence, ultimately making her believe that she was incapable of navigating the world without his guidance and superior perception. The insidious nature of gaslighting lies in its ability to isolate the victim within her own mind. When your closest confidant, the person you trust most, consistently tells you that your reality is flawed, you begin to doubt the very fabric of your perception. Elara's once vibrant inner world, rich with her unique perspectives and emotional truths, became a chaotic landscape of self-doubt and confusion. She stopped trusting her instincts, her memories, her feelings. The world outside felt equally unreliable, as her primary source of information, Liam, was constantly reshaping it. This is a profound form of psychological violence, a quiet assault on the very core of one's identity. Sigmund Freud, though focused on the unconscious, would recognize the immense psychological cost of such repression and distortion. When the ego, the part of the personality responsible for reality testing, is constantly undermined, the individual becomes vulnerable to the unconscious projections and manipulations of others. Elara's ego was under siege, her ability to distinguish internal reality from external manipulation severely compromised. This leads to what Erik Erikson might describe as a crisis of trust versus mistrust. Having been consistently misled and invalidated by a primary attachment figure, Elara's fundamental sense of trust in herself and in others was deeply fractured. How can one forge a path to freedom when the very ground beneath one's feet feels unstable, and the guiding light of one's own intuition has been extinguished? This journey of psychological unraveling culminates in a profound sense of powerlessness. Elara, once a woman of vibrant colors, was now a canvas painted in shades of gray, her inner landscape mirroring the confusion and despair that Liam had so carefully cultivated. Her belief in her own sanity, her capacity to perceive truth, was systematically dismantled, leaving her reliant on his distorted version of reality. She began to see herself through his eyes, overly emotional, forgetful, scatterbrained, and fundamentally flawed. The thought of leaving, of venturing out into a world where her own perceptions might be inherently untrustworthy, became terrifying. She was trapped, not by physical chains, but by the psychological bonds of self-doubt and a profoundly skewed understanding of reality. The archetype Elara embodies here is the fragmented self, a woman whose internal coherence has been shattered by sustained psychological manipulation. She is a testament to the devastating power of invalidation and the deliberate distortion of reality. Her plight serves as a stark warning. The subtle attacks on your perceptions, memories, and emotions are not minor disagreements. They are direct assaults on your psychological integrity. Your reality is valid. Your feelings are signals, not flaws. If you find yourself constantly questioning your memory, if your emotions are routinely dismissed, if you feel perpetually confused by a loved one's version of events that contradicts your own, these are not signs of your inadequacy. They are glaring red flags of manipulation. Reclaim your internal compass. Start by journaling your experiences, noting down conversations, and seeking external validation from trusted friends or professionals. Trust your gut. It holds a profound truth that external forces cannot extinguish. Your journey to wholeness begins with recognizing the truth of your own experience, unwavering and undeniable. Even when the mind begins to grasp the distortions and the heart yearns for escape, an insidious force often binds her still. The deeply ingrained fear of confronting the unknown, a legacy of childhood conditioning and societal expectations. This final, most formidable chain is the golden handcuff of learned helplessness and the profound anxiety of stepping into a future unscripted by another's control. It is the paradox of longing for freedom while simultaneously fearing its boundless expanse. Let us turn our gaze to the profound insights of Albert Bandura and his theory of social learning, particularly the concept of self-efficacy. Bandura argued that much of our behavior is learned through observation, imitation, and the belief in our own capacity to succeed in specific situations. When a woman has been consistently undermined, her agency eroded, and her successes dismissed, her self-efficacy plummets. She internalizes the message that she is incapable, weak, or unworthy, making the leap toward independence feel like an insurmountable chasm. This isn't merely a lack of confidence. It's a deep-seated belief that any effort to change her circumstances will inevitably fail, a learned helplessness that paralyzes her even when the door to freedom stands ajar. Elara's journey through the fog of gaslighting eventually led her to a quiet, terrifying realization. She no longer knew who she was without Liam. His criticisms, his control, his distorted reality had become her own internal landscape. The thought of leaving, once a desperate whisper in the darkest hours, now felt like a terrifying plunge into an abyss. Where would she go? How would she survive? The artistic soul that once thrived had been starved, leaving her with a crippling fear of financial insecurity. Liam had often subtly mocked her past aspirations, reinforcing the idea that her creative pursuits were whimsical, unrealistic, and certainly not a viable means of support. You think you can just paint your way through life, Elara? Be realistic. These words, spoken with a faux concern, had burrowed deep into her psyche, cultivating a powerful fear of inadequacy. Her social isolation, painstakingly engineered by Liam, meant her external support system was practically non-existent. The friends who once offered perspective and camaraderie had faded into the background, weary of her constant cancellations and Liam's subtle disdain. The perceived lack of external support amplified her internal fear. Who would she turn to? Who would believe her? The silence around her, once filled with the vibrant hum of her own life, was now a heavy shroud, muffling any whispers of hope or self-belief. This profound loneliness, coupled with her diminished self-efficacy, made the idea of starting over seem not just daunting, but utterly impossible. She was caught in a cycle of dependency, not necessarily born of love, but of a terrifying void where her independent identity once resided. This emotional and psychological bondage was further solidified by a deep-seated fear of judgment, a fear often rooted in earlier life experiences. Perhaps Elara, like many women, carried an unexamined script from childhood, a narrative that taught her to prioritize external approval over internal truth, to be good and compliant above all else. This unconscious pattern, what Jung might refer to as the pure eternus or puella aeterna shadow in others, a reluctance to fully embrace adult responsibility and individuation, can manifest as a powerful resistance to challenging the status quo. The thought of upsetting Liam, of facing his inevitable anger or calculated sadness, felt overwhelmingly terrifying. She imagined herself as the villain in a story where he was the wronged party, a narrative he had painstakingly constructed over years. The shame of failing at the relationship, of being perceived as ungrateful or difficult, was a powerful deterrent, even stronger than the yearning for her own soul's freedom. William James, the father of American psychology, emphasized the practical and adaptive functions of the mind. He would note that sustained negative reinforcement and the lack of positive reinforcement for independent action would inevitably lead to a weakening of the will. Elara's will had been systematically eroded, her capacity for independent thought and action atrophied from disuse. The path to freedom, therefore, required not just a rational decision, but a profound act of will, a reignition of her own internal spark that had been smothered for so long. This is the heart of true healing, moving beyond passive endurance to active self-reclamation. It is the courage to stand in the terrifying discomfort of the unknown, trusting that the silence of fear can be replaced by the quiet strength of self-belief. Elara's turning point wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a sudden epiphany. It was a subtle shift, a quiet whisper that began to penetrate the fog of her despair. One ordinary morning, as she stared at her reflection, she saw not just the tired eyes of a woman diminished, but a fleeting glimpse of the vibrant artist she once was. It was a memory, a ghost of her former self, but powerful enough to ignite a tiny spark. That spark, nurtured slowly, painstakingly, became a flicker of hope. She started, cautiously, to read books on psychology, hidden away from Liam's watchful eye. She stumbled upon stories of women who had reclaimed their lives, women who had broken free from similar unseen chains. Each story was a tiny beacon, illuminating the possibility of her own liberation. She began to practice shadow work in secret, confronting the repressed parts of herself. The anger she'd suppressed, the fear she'd internalized, the artist she'd abandoned. She started to journal, meticulously documenting Liam's gaslighting tactics, slowly rebuilding her trust in her own perceptions. Each entry was a brick, rebuilding the foundation of her reality. She found an old, dusty sketchbook and, in stolen moments, began to draw again, simple lines at first, then more complex forms. It was a clandestine act of rebellion, a quiet reclaiming of her true self. These small, deliberate acts of self-care and self-reclamation were the initial steps of her individuation journey, a slow, arduous process of becoming whole again. The final push came from an unexpected source, an old art school friend, Sarah, who, despite Liam's best efforts to alienate her, had never truly given up. A casual text, "Thinking of you, Elara, still painting?" was the gentle catalyst. The question, so simple yet so profound, shattered the illusion of total isolation. It was a lifeline. Elara, trembling, replied. And then, for the first time in years, she opened up, hesitantly at first, then with a torrent of suppressed pain and confusion. Sarah listened, without judgment, offering not solutions, but unwavering validation. "Your feelings are real, Elara. You're not crazy." Those words, a balm to her wounded soul, were the key that unlocked the final, most tenacious chain. The journey wasn't easy. There were moments of profound doubt, of overwhelming fear, of the deep-seated urge to retreat into the familiar comfort of her prison. But this time, she had a fragile yet resolute belief in herself, fueled by Sarah's unwavering support and the rediscovery of her own inner strength. She understood that true liberation isn't about escaping a person. It's about reclaiming your self-worth. It's about recognizing that your inherent value is not dependent on external validation, that your inner peace is paramount. This transformation, a profound internal rebirth, allowed her to face Liam not with anger, but with a quiet, resolute detachment. When she finally told him she was leaving, her voice was steady, her gaze unwavering. His manipulations, his attempts to gaslight her one last time, simply bounced off her newfound shield of self-possession. She had reconnected with her anima, the inner feminine principle of creativity, intuition, and emotional depth that he had sought to suppress. Elara's story is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. She is the archetype of the phoenix rising, a woman who, from the ashes of her diminished self, found the courage to rebuild. Her journey underscores the profound truth that the path to freedom often begins not with a grand gesture, but with small, consistent acts of self-reclamation. You, too, possess this innate power. If you find yourself in a similar prison of invisible chains, remember this: your inherent worth is not contingent upon anyone else's approval or perception. Your feelings are valid. Your experiences are real. Begin your own journey of liberation. Start small. Engage in acts of self-care that nourish your soul, whether it's walking in nature, meditating, practicing yoga, or simply dedicating time to a forgotten hobby. These are not trivial pursuits. They are acts of defiance against the forces that seek to diminish you, quiet affirmations of your own existence. Challenge negative thoughts when they arise, replacing them with affirmations of your strength and resilience. Seek out a trusted friend, a therapist, or a support group where your experiences can be validated. This is your life, your canvas, and you hold the brush. The most profound transformation occurs when you realize that the power to change, to heal, and to thrive resides not in external circumstances, but within the stillness of your own heart. Embrace this internal power. Let it transform you, propel you forward, and fill your life with the vibrant colors of your authentic self. The world awaits the masterpiece that is you, unleashed and free. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with other friends to spread valuable insights in life. Thank you for listening. The END.